Picture this. You're a 4.5-ton ground sloth, built like a tank, with bones so dense they could stop a freight train. You've survived ice ages, predators, and countless natural disasters. You're practically indestructible. So how did you meet your end? Drowning in a pool of your own crap? Welcome to the utterly bizarre world of prehistoric deaths, where nature's most formidable creatures met their doom in ways so ridiculous, so unexpected, that they'd be laughable if they weren't so tragically real. Today, we're diving into the fossil record's most peculiar mass graves, where giant sloths, horny frogs, and flying reptiles all learned the hard way that life has a twisted sense of humor. But that ground sloth, it's just the beginning of our journey into prehistory's strangest obituaries. In the misty highlands of southwestern Ecuador lies a fossil site called Tank Loma. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, just another layer of ancient sediment waiting to tell its story. But beneath the surface lurks one of prehistory's most baffling mass graves. The site holds thousands upon thousands of bones, all belonging to a single species, Eruption, the giant ground sloth. These weren't your average tree-dwelling sloths. These were absolute units, weighing as much as a small elephant and standing 3 times the height of a human being. Picture a creature so robust, so heavily built, that its skeleton alone could withstand tremendous force. These were the tanks of the Pleistocene, herbivorous giants that thundered across the Americas with seemingly nothing to fear. Yet something had killed them. Not just 1 or 2, dozens of these titans, all dead in the same location, all having perished around the same time between 18,000 and 23,000 years ago. But what could possibly bring down such formidable beasts? And why were they all here, clustered together in this remote corner of Ecuador like some prehistoric gathering gone horribly wrong? The giant sloths weren't the alone in their misfortune. Across the ancient world, other creatures were meeting equally bizarre ends, each death more peculiar than the last. Picture the scene: a shallow pool in what was once lush Ecuadorian marshland. The giant sloths, being creatures of habit, would visit this watering hole regularly to drink, bathe, and, yes, relieve themselves. Over time, their bathroom breaks accumulated in the stagnant water. What started as a refreshing oasis slowly transformed into a toxic waste bucket of despair. Bacteria thrived in the nutrient-rich environment. Parasites multiplied. Disease-causing pathogens ran rampant in what had become a primordial cesspool. But the giant sloths kept coming back. They were creatures of routine, and this had been their gathering place for generations. Even as the water became increasingly contaminated, they continued to wallow in it, drink from it, and add to its toxic contents. The pathogens eventually proved too much for even these hardy giants. One by one, they succumbed to the diseases festering in their own creation. The very waste that had once been a natural part of their ecosystem became their downfall. This wasn't just speculation. The theory gained credibility from a real-life incident in Tanzania during the 1970s, where 140 hippos took refuge in a shallow pool during a drought. Within weeks, over 100 had died from disease and poisoning as their waste contaminated their only water source. The giant sloths had suffered the same fate, trapped by drought conditions that forced them to rely on an increasingly lethal water source. Their robust bodies, built to survive the harshest conditions, were no match for the microscopic killers they had unknowingly cultivated. But not all bizarre prehistoric deaths were quite so undignified. Some creatures at least went out with a bang. Take the case of the 45-million-year-old frogs discovered in Germany's Geisel region. Hundreds of fossilized amphibians were found in what researchers dubbed a mass grave, but these weren't casualties of drought or disease. These frogs had literally screwed themselves to death. For decades, this fossil site remained an unsolvable mystery. The frogs appeared perfectly healthy, no signs of predation, disease, or environmental stress. They had simply died en masse in what had been an expansive prehistoric swamp, a paradise for amphibians. what could possibly kill hundreds of frogs in their ideal habitat? The answer came from observing modern frogs and their, shall we say, enthusiastic mating habits. During intense breeding seasons, many amphibians become so exhausted from reproduction that they literally drown during or after the act. The prehistoric frogs, likely spending their lives on land and returning to the swamp only to mate, weren't the strongest swimmers to begin with. Add in the exhaustion from marathon mating sessions, and you have a recipe for aquatic disaster. The males, in their eagerness to reproduce, would often push females underwater during copulation. The females, already exhausted from egg-laying, couldn't fight their way back to the surface. Both sexes would get so focused on reproduction that they'd forget basic survival instincts like, breathing. The German fossil site preserves the aftermath of what might be history's deadliest orgy. Meanwhile, in the skies above ancient Brazil, another creature was about to learn that flying at high speeds and sharp plants don't mix well. Ludodactylus was a pterosaur, a flying reptile that looked remarkably like what kids imagine when they think of pterodactyls. With its impressive wingspan and predatory lifestyle, it ruled the Cretaceous skies with confidence. But confidence can be a killer when you're flying full speed into a yucca plant. The fossilized remains tell a brutal story. Embedded in the pterosaur's lower jaw is a yucca leaf, not just resting there, but actually impaled through the bone. The leaf, with its razor-sharp edges that give it nicknames like Adam's needle and Spanish bayonet, had turned the flying predator into prehistoric shish kebab. Picture the scene: Ludodactylus soaring through the ancient Brazilian landscape, scanning for prey below. Maybe it was diving for a fish, or perhaps chasing another pterosaur. In its focused pursuit, it failed to notice the deadly plant directly in its flight path. The impact was catastrophic. The yucca leaf punched through the pterosaur's jaw like a natural spear, lodging so deeply that removal was impossible. What followed was a slow, agonizing death as the wounded creature struggled to eat or drink with its disfigured mouth. The wound would have become infected quickly in the humid Cretaceous climate. The pterosaur's attempts to dislodge the green spear would have only made the injury worse, driving the leaf deeper and causing more tissue damage. Within days, what had been an apex predator became a victim of botanical brutality, the only known fossil death caused by a leaf. But plants weren't finished with their prehistoric killing spree. As the age of dinosaurs drew to its catastrophic close, trees themselves became weapons of mass destruction. The Tanis fossil site in North Dakota preserves one of the most remarkable moments in Earth's history, the very day the dinosaurs died. Here, buried in sediment from the massive asteroid impact, lie the remains of creatures killed not by the space rock itself, but by the chaos it unleashed. Among the victims, a turtle skewered by a tree. When the 6-mile-wide asteroid slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula 66 million years ago, it triggered earthquakes, tsunamis, and atmospheric shock waves that reached even North Dakota, nearly 2,000 miles from ground zero. Trees became projectiles, launched by seismic forces and driven through anything in their path. The turtle, seeking shelter from the cosmic chaos, instead found itself pinned beneath a wooden spear. It was just one casualty in a site filled with impossible deaths. Fish with molten debris in their gills, essentially having drowned in lava. Dinosaurs crushed by tsunami waves. Entire ant colonies buried alive under asteroid ejecta. The violence preserved at Tanis defies imagination. Even from thousands of miles away, the asteroid's impact created a hellscape where survival was pure chance and death came in forms beyond comprehension. Not all bizarre deaths were quick, though. In the Turkish region of Cappadocia, scientists discovered evidence of perhaps the most prolonged and agonizing death in the fossil record. The landscape of Cappadocia is otherworldly, shaped by ancient volcanic eruptions that created a maze of strange rock formations. Within this alien terrain, paleontologists found the remains of a Sabertooth, an extinct species related to modern white rhinos. Or rather, they found part of it. Only the rhino's head remained, but what a story it told. The skull was perfectly preserved, yet bore the unmistakable signs of extreme heat exposure. Its surface was rough and corrugated, while the interior of its teeth were brittle and corroded. This rhino had been cooked alive. The evidence pointed to a volcanic eruption that caught the massive herbivore in a surge of lava exceeding 750 degrees Fahrenheit. But the rhino's ordeal didn't end there. As it writhed in unimaginable agony, a pyroclastic flow, a fast-moving avalanche of superheated gas, ash, and volcanic rock slammed into its already burning body. The impact was so violent that it completely dismembered the rhino, explaining why only the skull survived. The rest of the 2-ton beast was scattered across the volcanic landscape, lost to the ages. But Cappadocia's rhino wasn't unique. In Washington state, scientists discovered something even stranger, a cave shaped exactly like an upside-down rhino. This wasn't coincidence. It was the fossilized mold of an actual prehistoric rhino that had been encased in lava. The cave's distinctive shape, with 2 prongs at the top and a protrusion to the side, perfectly matched the anatomy of a Diceratotherium, a North American rhino species. The death scenario was equally bizarre. The rhino had been wallowing in a water source when a volcanic eruption sent lava flowing toward it. The molten rock moved slowly enough that the rhino likely died from heat and toxic gases before the lava even reached it, a prolonged, torturous end. As decomposition gases caused the rhino's body to bloat and float upside down, the advancing lava enveloped it completely. The surrounding water rapidly cooled the molten rock, creating a perfect natural mold around the deceased beast. Over millions of years, erosion exposed this geological tomb, creating one of nature's most macabre monuments, a cave shaped by death itself. Perhaps the most haunting discovery of all lies in Ethiopia's Afar Triangle, where the remains of our own distant ancestors tell a story that remains unsolved to this day. AL333, known as the First Family, represents one of the rarest finds in paleontology, a group of early hominins who all died together 3.2 million years ago. 17 individuals, ranging from adults to children, their bones intermingled in a single location. Finding even one complete hominin skeleton is extraordinarily rare. Finding an entire family is virtually impossible unless something catastrophic happened. But what? The original theory suggested a flash flood, but sediment analysis ruled that out. What remained were 2 equally disturbing possibilities: massacre or mass poisoning. The massacre theory points to large predators, possibly saber-toothed cats like Homotherium or Meganterion. These pack hunters were capable of surplus killing, taking more prey than they could eat. The missing finger and toe bones from AL333 support this theory, as these small bones are often accidentally swallowed by large cats seeking calcium. But could even a pride of saber-toothed cats kill 17 hominins in one attack? The logistics seem nearly impossible, especially given that these early humans likely lived in small, scattered groups. The alternative is equally chilling: food poisoning so severe it killed an entire family within hours. While less violent than predation, this scenario raises its own questions. What could poison an entire group of primarily vegetarian hominins? The mystery of AL333 remains unsolved, and 3.2 million-year-old cold case that may never be closed. The squid and the fish. Our final tale of prehistoric mortality comes from the Jurassic period, where multiple fossils have been discovered showing the same bizarre scene: fish with squid-like cephalopods impaled inside them. Tharsis, a Jurassic fish, and Belemnitus, a contemporary cephalopod, appeared together in fossil after fossil, locked in their final moments. The belemnitus's hard internal shell pierces through the fish's body like a spear, creating a tableau of prehistoric violence that puzzled scientists for years. Which creature was the aggressor? The evidence suggested neither. Recent analysis revealed that the belemnituses were already dead when the impalement occurred, their bodies covered with barnacles and other organisms that only grow on carrion. As the cephalopods decomposed, gas buildup in their internal shells caused them to float to the surface. The hungry Tharsis, seeing what appeared to be a tasty floating snack, attempted to suck the dead belemnitus into its mouth. But the aerodynamic design of the cephalopod and the unusual size ratio between predator and prey created a perfect storm of accidental self-destruction. The belemnitus's sharp rostrum slipped through the fish's mouth and directly into its gills, creating a makeshift spear that the Tharsis couldn't dislodge. As the fish struggled to free itself, it only drove the projectile deeper, ultimately suffocating on what should have been an easy meal. These bizarre deaths scattered across millions of years of Earth's history reveal a fundamental truth about life. Survival is often a matter of pure luck. The most formidable creatures, from 4-ton ground sloths to flying reptiles with 13-foot wingspans, could be felled by the most ridiculous circumstances. Every fossilized death we've discovered represents millions more that remain hidden in the rock, their stories lost to time. For every pterosaur killed by a plant, countless others met equally absurd ends that we'll never know about. These fossils serve as more than just scientific curiosities. They're humbling reminders of life's fragility and randomness. Despite all our technology and knowledge, we remain subject to the same forces that claimed these prehistoric giants: bad timing, environmental change, and the occasional cosmic bad luck. The next time you're having a terrible day, remember, at least you're not a Jurassic fish with a dead squid in your throat, or a giant ground sloth drowning in your own waste, or a pterosaur with a yucca plant for a jaw ornament. In the grand scheme of Earth's history, we're all just one step away from becoming someone else's bizarre fossil discovery. The question isn't whether death will find us, it's whether our demise will be interesting enough to puzzle future paleontologists. After all, in the Fossil Records Hall of Fame, the strangest deaths make the best stories.